It's been 11 years since New Super Mario Bros. Was released. New Super Mario Bros. Was an incredibly influential game. It brought the Super Mario Bros. Series back after a 13-year-long break without a 2D Mario platformer. It sold incredibly well. It is one of the 10 best-selling video games of all time. And most importantly, it revived the 2D platforming genre, all on its own. In short, the game is one of the most influential games of its time. I remember playing it a decade ago and really enjoying it, but I haven't really touched the game since. So what I want to do for this video is to revisit and to discuss this 11-year-old game and to find out if it is still fun to play today. So are you ready?
Let's go!
Okay, so the game starts with a really short story section which is almost a little bit self-ironic. So Mario goes on a walk with his beloved princess when suddenly lightning strikes Peach's castle. Mario goes to investigate this immediately, but while he's gone, Bowser Jr. jumps out of a bush and kidnaps Princess Peach. And that's our story. I honestly think that that's the perfect story for a Mario game. Mario games simply aren't complex narratives that need a lot of storytelling to be enjoyable. And most importantly, it only takes about a minute from the start of a new save file until we are in the middle of the gameplay. I really think it is important for platforming games that it is possible to open up a new save file and to immediately jump into the action without having to go through 20 minutes of useless cutscenes. And a lot of Mario games actually fail at doing this. So that's something which I really like about this game right at the beginning. So the first stage is an interesting bridge between the old and the new games. At first glance, this level looks like all first levels in 2D Mario games looked up until this point. It's a grassy level, there is a Yum Yum mushroom and there are a couple of Goombas and Koopas which threaten Mario's health. But once we hit this question block, things change, because this question block contains the huge mushroom, one of the 3 new power-ups. This power-up transforms Mario into a gigantic, wreckful version of himself and allows him to destroy whole stages. That's actually a little bit funny, since the level layout stays the same as it is expected from a first level of a Mario game. But instead of jumping through this level, Mario runs through it like a wrecking ball and destroys everything that enters his path. That's a really interesting start for a game and a really funny way to communicate that we are about to play a classic 2D Mario game, but with a couple of twists. The other 2 new power-ups are the mini mushroom, which transforms Mario into a super small mini version of himself, allows him to go through very small corridors and gives him a very fluttery jump. And there is the blue shell suit, which transforms Mario into a plumbing Koopa and allows him to use a Koopa attack, which is not only able to hurt Koopas but also destroys blocks when hit from the side. The other power-ups are the traditional mushroom and fire flower. There are a couple of things which I found very interesting when replaying the game for this video regarding power-ups. First, the super overpowered flight power-up is missing. Most Mario games had a power-up which gave Mario insane air movement, like the super leaf, the propeller suit or the cape feather. Such a power-up is completely missing from New Super Mario Bros., which really surprised me when replaying the game. Secondly, almost all levels only contain normal mushrooms and fire flowers, while the later entries in the New Super Mario Bros. Series usually build the levels around the different power-ups which are available in the specific stages. Almost all levels share the same power-ups in New Super Mario Bros. This leads to 2 interesting things. First, having a special power-up like a Koopa shell or a mini mushroom feels really special. These power-ups are by far more valuable than they are in the later entries of the Mario Bros. Series, and losing one feels really punishing, but finding one really rewarding. On the other side, it also forbids to design levels around the power-ups found in the levels. In New Super Mario Bros. U, for example, there are tons of star coin puzzles and challenges that can only be solved if Mario ate a stage-specific power-up before. That's not the case in this game. The 3 star coins appear for the first time in this game as well. Every stage has 3 of these super coins and they really help to create interesting optional challenges and to make the stages feel less linear. The star coins are mainly used to unlock optional levels and toad houses on the world map. Mario's journey to save his beloved princess leads him through a total of 8 worlds. First, he has to survive in the grassy plains of World 1, followed by the dangerous World 2 desert, which is filled with dangerous enemies like Pokies. Next, he has to survive all the challenges of World 3, which contains a lot of water and beach-themed stages. If Mario defeated the World 2 boss as Mini Mario, his path leads him into the dangerous swamp areas of World 4 instead, where he has to survive on top of wigglers while avoiding poisoned water. The fifth world contains mainly of slippery frozen levels and peaceful but dangerous snowy mountains. Depending on how our back then still a plumber defeated the World 5 boss, he either has to enter World 6 or 7 afterwards. The sixth world is a dangerous rocky mountain and home to the rocky ranches, which try to make Mario's life a lot harder. And the seventh world takes place in the clouds and is the home to the Lakitus, as well as a gigantic and huge abnormity of a wiggler. The last world is filled with fire, the home of Bowser's castle, and has a dark Halloween theme going on as well. But how does it feel to control Mario through all these worlds? Well, surprisingly mediocre. So here's the thing, the classic jumping and running in this game feels as great as it always does in Mario games. But this game is also the first 2D Mario game with a wall jump and a ground pound. And both felt awful to use to me. It's a little bit hard to judge these controls and their timing for me, because I played so much New Super Mario Bros. U and Mario Maker that every game that has just slightly different ground pound or wall jump timings feels wrong to me. So I wondered if there's some rational reason why this movement text felt so much better to use in the newer games. And yes, there is something really weird going on in New Super Mario Bros. First, the wall jump. In the Wii U entry of the series, it's possible to wall jump almost immediately when touching a wall. But in the DS entry, there is a really long and weird delay before a wall jump becomes possible. It's really hard to say if the wall jump in the Wii U game is simply better implemented and really feels easier to use, or if I'm just so used to the quick wall jump timing of the Wii U game that I always missed it in New Super Mario Bros. Anyway, I found myself missing super easy wall jumps over and over again, but I'm not sure if this is my or the game's fault. Where I'm sure that it's the game's fault is the ground pound though. I missed so many ground pounds which I wanted to make while playing the game, and I really didn't understand how it is possible to mess up ground pounds. So I rebooted the Wii U entry once again and tested what's going on there. So if you want to do a ground pound in a Wii U game, all you have to do is to hit down on the gamepad while in air. And in my opinion, that's how it should be. You jump into a direction, and while in air you decide to ground pound by hitting down on the D-pad. And there you go. Surprisingly, this is not how ground pounds work in New Super Mario Bros. If you hold the direction button and jump, and then in mid-air hit the down button, Mario won't do a ground pound. He'll do nothing. The only way to do a ground pound is to let go of the D-pad entirely so that there is no input for a moment, and then to hit down while still in air. This felt like a really overcomplicated way to do ground pounds to me, and I had a lot of troubles getting fast ground pounds to dodge obstacles. These two things really annoyed me about the controls and movement of Mario in NSMB, but that's also a smaller problem than it might sound like. The two moves aren't that hard to perform that you really would miss them in a setting where the game really wants you to use them, but they're missable when you try to dodge a dangerous enemy situation by using a really advanced wall jump ground pound combo. It's more of a problem for experienced players. Other than that, it feels as great as expected to navigate Mario through all these wonderful and colorful worlds. The different worlds feel really distinct from each other, and this is something at which the game really succeeds. Not only the different worlds are really different, but each individual level feels completely different from the one before. Each stage is designed around a new, unique gimmick and has a unique charm to it. This is probably the greatest strength of the game. I was always curious which new and crazy gimmicks the game will throw into my path in the next stage, and the game is capable to surprise Mario from the first stage up to the very last one. While the game really succeeds at a lot of things which should later become staples in the New Super Mario Bros. Series, there are also a couple of things which aren't really developed yet. The checkpoint system, for example, is really weird in this game. Instead of having a checkpoint flag, which when touched becomes the checkpoints are invisible in this installment, and it's often really unclear when a checkpoint is triggered and where the checkpoints are placed. Some stages even have no checkpoints at all. It's It's not really a big deal when playing the game, but it's something which is really noticeable when playing the game after playing the Wii and Wii U installments. What is also interesting is that the world themes and structures which all later entries should use are already established in this game. Mario has to survive a couple of levels before defeating a boss in the small castle. Afterwards he has to survive even more different stages before defeating the world boss and moving on. These boss fights are really disappointing and among the best ones in the series. Here's what I mean. Every small castle features the same boss fight against Bowser Jr. and these fights become really old really fast. While the arena is always a little bit different and Bowser Jr. learns new moves in every world, the fight stays basically the same and becomes a little bit boring. Meanwhile, the final world bosses are really cool and among the coolest in the series. There is a gigantic Goomba, the Koopa King himself, a crazy Monty Mole in a tank, and PT Piranha. By the way, at the start of the PT Piranha boss fight, Bowser Jr. does something really interesting. He jumps on top of his own creature in order to show Mario how to damage this boss. Teaching certain game concepts by having the enemies do them first is one of the oldest game design tricks, and New Super Mario Bros. Does this dozens of times. But back to the boss fights. All these boss fights are really great, especially for an 11-year-old game, but none of them is a really hard challenge for Mario. The whole game is rather easy and not very challenging, with the exception of the 8th world, where the difficulty suddenly really spikes. I saw my first game over screen when replaying the game for this video in the small castle in World 8, but then I made it for a couple more before beating the game. This entry in the New Super Mario Bros. Series is probably the easiest one. But this is something I'm personally fine with. I don't play Mario games for their insane challenge. Mario games are more about unique ideas, this fantastic, colorful world, exploration and small but memorable moments for me, than about beating insanely challenging stages. And there are tons of unique and surprising ideas in this game. There are switches which transform the sand, evil possessed platforms which try to get rid of our poor plumber, crushing womps, gigantic wigglers, and horrific eels. There are tons of ideas taken out of old Mario games and even more new ones. This is where the game really shines and where the insane charm of this game lies. One level that I enjoyed exceptionally much is 8-6. There is so much cool stuff going on here. Mario has to escape a volcano. There is rising lava at the bottom, which threatens to burn him. Meanwhile, it is possible to scroll through the sides of the stage, which creates a couple of interesting challenges. Then there are these really cool spin jump platforms which catapult Mario high into the air. There are pipes which shoot plumbers, and then there are some small throwbacks to the original Mario Bros. This part in specific reminded me a lot of Mario's first plumbing job, and all of this in front of this beautiful lava setting. This level is really exceptional and shows where the magic of this game lies, in all the different and crazy surprising things it throws at you without an end. There are also a couple of staples of Mario games missing here. There are no illusionary walls, Yoshi doesn't make an appearance, and weirdly enough, there are almost no small puzzles, which appear so often in the later entries. What is also not present in this game, but in almost every Mario game afterwards, is some sort of super easy mode. Maybe this is why the game never gets really difficult, since Nintendo maybe was worried that the game otherwise becomes unplayable for less experienced players. The other entries in the New Super Mario series usually have such a feature, but also are a little bit more difficult. At least I remember them as more difficult. Anyway, once Mario defeated all of Bowser's evil bosses and survived all the dangerous worlds, he finally makes it into Bowser's castle. The last level features a really cool and unique flip the stage mechanic and is one of the very few real challenges for Mario in this game. And then he faces Bowser a second time. Bowser Jr. kept Bowser's remains and throws them into a magical kettle which resurrects the Koopa King, since this is how resurrection works in a Mushroom Kingdom. Now Mario faces both Bowsers at once and has to hit the switch behind them to finally save his princess and to end the game. New Super Mario Bros. Is a really interesting game. It revived the 2D platforming genre all on its own and brought the 2D Mario series into the 21st century. The game is in the top 10 of the best-selling video games of all time and made other studios realize that there is still a huge interest in 2D platforming games. The game isn't as original and polished as its successors, but it acts as a bridge between the old and the new Super Mario games, sold incredibly well, and is probably one of the most influential games games of its time and still a ton of fun to play, even 11 years after its release. Thanks for watching this little video, I hope you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to leave me a thumbs up, and maybe you feel especially 2D today and want to hit the subscribe button as well. I hope that you have a wonderful day and to see you soon. Goodbye!